Many children harbor hidden anger and resentment toward their parents, and often the cause is inauthenticity in the relationship. The child has a deep longing for the parent to be there as a human being, not as a role, no matter how conscientiously that role is being played. You may be doing all the right things and the best you can for your child, but even doing the best you can is not enough. In fact, doing is never enough if you neglect being. So even though Eckhart is specifying that it's a relationship with your child or a child in your family, I think this definitely can be applied to all relationships, right? Because we all want some sort of like authentic, fulfilling type of relationship. And so the important part that he specifies there is a big difference in doing versus being. That no matter how much you do in your life, how much you do together with whoever it is that you're with, that unless there is a dimension of being there, that the relationship may stay shallow and not have much depth if all it's focused on is the dimension of doing. And I think the reason why Eckhart, is giving the example through your relationship with your child is because children are a very good gauge of how present you are, how much in your being you are. And so, if you've ever been around a child and you're playing with them, let's say, if your attention is not fully there, or if you're on your phone, let's say, the child will always seem to try to pull you back and get your attention, right? Get your 100% attention. And so oftentimes, they really are aware without really realizing it of how present you are, and they try to pull you back in. So it's a really good, test for how present you are in that moment. And Eckhart talks about how there are two forms of attention. One is form-based attention, which is basically, stop doing this, do that. Did you do your homework? Did you eat your dinner? We got to pack up and get ready to go soon, things like that. It's the doing aspect of life. And although it's obviously really important and has its place, if your relationship to another person is only in the doing, it'll feel like quite a shallow relationship, that there won't be any, depth to it. And there is the formless attention, which is basically when you are really present and you are in your kind of beingness. And when you're when you're in that space, when you're with someone, it brings more depth to the relationship, and you're able to kind of recognize your true self in someone else. And so there's a level of recognition that happens that doesn't necessarily need words or comprehension even to really understand it. But there is, a way of seeing another person. It's almost like what it reminds me of that movie in Avatar when they say, "I see you." So yeah, so it just makes me think of that. But basically, this is where, you are present, you are in your being dimension, and you're with another person kind of having that shared experience. And you don't need anything from the other person. You don't need, it to go a specific way. You don't have any expectations, essentially, because you're in that formless dimension. And Eckhart talks about how if you neglect being in a relationship, that it can feel like something vital is missing from that relationship, that it can also create this unconscious pain and resentment towards the other person if there is no being in that relationship. And I can definitely say that I've experienced that, because growing up, I didn't really have much of a relationship with my mom. She barely gave me any attention, but when she did, it was purely only form-based attention. And so, there was that kind of unconscious resentment and pain there, because I felt like I wasn't seen. I never felt like I was recognized. She didn't know who I was. And to this day, I still feel like she doesn't know who I am. But growing up, I did feel that frustration of not being seen, not being recognized, and not being known. And so it was kind of like a very, challenging thing to kind of grow up feeling like. That I always looked for something outside of myself to tell me who I was, to try to get, some sort of recognition or acknowledgement. And Eckhart talks about what it means to be a human being, that life is basically a balance of balancing our human side as well as our being side, that being a human being is basically interwoven with each other. On the one hand, being human is form-based, essentially. This is where we are in a physical body, we have, certain limitations and abilities with it. And when it comes to human love, it's conditional, it's possessive, and it can be intermittent. And in being human in itself is not enough to have a fulfilling or authentic relationship. It's only when we kind of tap into our beingness, our presence, that we are able to start getting into that formless aspect. Again, with the importance of form-based attention, like there is a place and a necessity for it. Being human too obviously has its importance and necessity for it, and we also need to honor that. But we also need to start, becoming more present and aware of who we truly are, of who we are underneath the surface. And when you start to introduce, a sense of being in a relationship, that's where true love can exist, because love is when you are able to recognize yourself in another and you see yourself as an equal rather than see yourself as a certain role or certain status compared to another person. Like that's kind of more on the human realm. That's more of this form-based thinking and how we are relative to each other. But when you start bringing that sense of beingness into your relationships, you start to just be there in presence and be able to not have any expectations or have judgments about, who they are, who you are, and where we all stand to get next to each other and stuff like that. I guess another way to say it is that when you are able to be present in the space of another person, that's where unconditional love can exist. It's not the same as human love, as I've already mentioned, and it just brings a deeper dimension to the relationship that you have with the other person. So I think it really is such a great gift that when you are awakening and you are able to bring that kind of beingness and presence into the relationship that you have with other people, whether it's children, other adults, friends, or whoever, even your coworkers, right? That when you're able to bring that presence to the relationship, it can be, felt on a deeper level, whether they recognize it or not. And I think that's really, such a great gift to be able to share with others. So I guess that is everything for today. I will see you next time, and thank you so much for watching.